According to the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, there are approximately 90,000 missing persons in the United States at any given time. With the advancement of modern detective work and advanced scientific methods, such as genealogy testing, the vast majority of missing person cases end up being solved today. Even so, sometimes investigators just aren't able to provide enough conclusive evidence to put the pieces together on some of these cases, and they go unsolved. There have been some devastating, very suspicious missing persons cases in recent times that definitely fall into this category. Throughout history, though, all around the world, certain missing person cases have left investigators and families struggling to find answers. When there is little evidence to no evidence and no eyewitnesses, missing persons cases tragically end up being closed and unsolved. Come with us as we walk through some of the most puzzling and tragic missing persons cases throughout history all around the globe. For many people, 2020 was a year that they would like to forget. But for the families and friends of Savannah Hoskins, Christopher Daly, Jamesessel, Mary London, and Wendy Jerome, 2020 was a year of answers. These 5 cases went unsolved for decades. Now, the truth has finally been revealed. Savannah Hoskins, July 3rd, 1985. Savannah Hoskins was a 34-year-old mother of 5, living in Utah when she disappeared on July 3rd, 1985. A few weeks later, after her disappearance, 2 legs were found on the Ogden River. For decades, police suspected they belonged to Hoskins, but could never prove it. Her case quickly went cold. Finally, in 2019, police were able to positively identify the legs as Hoskins through DNA testing. On March 2, 2020, Weber County Attorney Chris Allred announced that Hoskins' husband, Joe Hoskins, was responsible for the murder. Unfortunately, Hoskins will never be charged with the murder since he had already passed away. We are confident based on all the evidence that if Joe were alive today, we would be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Joe Hoskins murdered his wife, Savannah, said Allred. The evidence that Allred is referring to includes incriminating statements made by Joe Hoskins, along with witness statements and the DNA evidence. Joe Hoskins Jr. remains skeptical. "No, I don't believe it," said Hoskins, before abruptly hanging up on the reporter. Kara Porter, the founder of the Utah Cold Case Coalition, researched Ogden police files and found that Savannah was trying to leave Joe and move to Idaho. She also found evidence which is backed up by one of Savannah's sons, Bobby Kersey Jr., that Joe was a violent man who would often physically abuse Savannah. The group is still hoping to find the rest of Savannah's remains and is offering a $3,000 reward for any information that will lead them to it. Christopher Daly, April 26, 1995. On April 26, 1995, 2 hunters found the body of 26-year-old Christopher Daly just outside Decatur, Alabama. He was dead from a gunshot wound to the head. Soon after this gruesome discovery, police found Daly's 1983 Toyota Tercel partially submerged in the Tennessee River with a rock tied to the accelerator. For years, police followed leads with no success until the case eventually went cold. That was until Detective Sean Muckadam of the Decatur Police Department picked up picked up the phone on November 18, 2020. On the other end was Johnny Dwight Whited, now 53 years old, confessing to the murder of Daly. At first, police were sure this call was a joke since Whited couldn't remember the year of the murder. That skepticism quickly faded when Whited was able to give out details of the crime that were never released to the public. Whited showed investigators to the crime scene where he reenacted the crime. Muckadam declined to comment on the specifics of the confession and reenactment, but did say Whited seemed remorseful. He said he was sorry multiple times. He was embarrassed about it. I can tell that it had been weighing on him for a long time. It was later revealed that Whited is terminally ill. It's not an excuse, said Muckadam. He killed somebody. He should have come forward all those years ago. Whited's motive for Daly's murder remains unclear. The two did not know each other. Jamesessel, March 22nd, 1992. On the night of March 22nd, 1992, 57-year-old James Essel was found stabbed to death behind the counter of his store, the Sugarloaf Mountain Market, located in Montgomery County, Maryland. Essel was known as a friendly, hard-working father who had given up his banking career to run the small shop, which, according to family members, reminded him of the serenity he had grown up near the ocean in Ghana. Given Essel's positive reputation, family and friends couldn't think of anyone who had wanted to harm him. The case quickly went cold. That is until late 2018, when Montgomery investigators sent unidentified DNA from the crime scene to a DNA technology company called Parabon Nanolabs. Parabon compared the DNA sample to the profile from people who had submitted DNA for family history research and found the name of a potential relative of the killer. From there, Montgomery police officer Steve Smuskery began building a family tree, which led him to the name of men who had lived in the area in 1992. Investigators called one of the men who had claimed to have never been to Essel's shop. He gave the officers a DNA sample which showed he was likely to be the biological brother or son of the killer. The man's father was dead, so police looked at his only brother, Hans Huitz. In early 2020, investigators obtained a search warrant for Huitz's DNA. The sample, which was taken from a swab on the inside of his cheek, made a direct match to the DNA left at the 1992 crime scene. On February 12th, Montgomery detectives and U.S. Marshal Service Task Force attempted to arrest Huitz on charges of first-degree murder, felony murder, and robbery with a dangerous weapon. Huitz produced a handgun, resulting in officers firing at him. He died of his injuries. Essel's daughter said that she wished the guy could have served time for the crime, but it's just a relief. Edwards continued, I just can't imagine how someone could live like that for all these years knowing what he did. Mary London, January 14th, 1981. It took nearly 40 years, but in April of 2020, the murder of young Mary London was finally solved. Unfortunately, her killer will never go to prison. Mary London, who was 17, was a 10th grade student at Sacramento High School when she went missing on January 14th, 1981. London was developmentally disabled. The following day, London's body was found on a rural stretch of San Juan Road. She died from multiple stab wounds. Despite the police's best efforts, the case went cold. They really did work very hard to find out who did it, said Mary's half-sister, Esther Schneider. In 2006, the case was reopened. 4 years later, the case was solved thanks to advances in DNA technology. Like the case of Jamesessel, police were able to use genetic genealogy to crack the case. Genetic testing linked a man named Vernon Parker to the crime. Parker was murdered in 1982, the year after he allegedly killed London. Sacramento Police Chief Daniel Hahn said, "The person that would have concluded was responsible for this was another young man around her, Mary's age, that was murdered downtown in Sacramento a little over a year after he murdered Mary. Parker was never looked into as a suspect prior to the DNA results. Whether Parker and London knew each other or not remains a mystery. Although Parker will never face prison for London's family, they finally have some answers, and that is enough. I told Mary, 'Now you can rest,'" said Schneider. Wendy Jerome, November 22nd, 1984. 14-year-old Wendy Jerome was last seen alive on Thanksgiving, 1984, when she left her Rochester, New York home to deliver a birthday card to a friend. When she didn't arrive home by curfew, her family grew worried. 3 hours later, Jerome's body was found just a quarter mile from her house. She had been raped and beaten to death. "Wendy did put up a fight," said Captain Frank Imbrino of the Rochester Police Department. 36 years later, in September of 2020, Jerome's killer was finally caught and arrested. 56-year-old Timothy Williams was charged with Wendy's murder, thanks to evidence from DNA that linked him to the crime. This comes after 2 unsuccessful attempts by police to use DNA to identify a potential suspect, one in 2000 and one again in 2016. Williams is a Rochester native who was 20 years old when the crime took place. He did not know Jerome. Unfortunately, he will not face rape charges as the statute of limitations has expired. "I never thought I would see this day, and now it's here," Wendy's mom, Marlene Jerome, said. Captain Umbrino addressed Wendy's mother, saying, "Marlene, I'm so sorry it took so long, but we finally did it." Thank you very much for listening to those 5 cases. It would mean a lot to me if you would hit that button, subscribing to my channel, sharing the link, sharing it with your friends, sharing it with whoever. I'd like to grow this channel a little bit larger than it is. But anyways, I've been Just Plain Creepy, and I'll catch you in the next